Welcome to Indian Immune News, a philanthropist, a healthcare pioneer, and entrepreneur, corporate executive. Brian Pereira is our guest today. He is going to receive Lifetime Achievement Award 2022 by England Choice Awards. We are going to talk to him how he got interested in philanthropy and all the contributions he has made to the healthcare industry as well as to the community both in the United States and in India, and how some of the skills he has learned and done we can apply ourselves into the community and society. Brian, welcome to our show and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Pereira. Much appreciated.
Excellent. And we are really, truly looking forward to honoring you on November 19th at the England Choice Awards Gala.
Well, the honor and privilege is mine. I think the honor is for the cause, not the person, but I'm happy to accept the award.
Excellent. So now I don't know where to start the interview. Should I start in India or should I start here? But I'm going to start in India in the very beginning.
Sure.
And I do remember you telling me a story about Chadar and meeting your wife Sunita for the first time. And the reason I want to bring her there in the interview because when we look at your family, she is equally passionate about philanthropy and all the work she does. Of course, we all know that you do a great job in that area as well. And now your son is also taking a similar sort of directions. So what is in that family, how the family involved? And I want to start in the very beginning. How did you meet Sunita?
Well, in India, as you know, there are 40 years ago, there were two leading institutions like Yale and Harvard. It was the Postgraduate Institute and the All India Institute. And all of us from medical schools across the country after finishing medicine for our post-graduation, we either attempted to go into regional schools or if you were ambitious, wanted to go to either PGI or All India Institute. And they would get 20,000 applications for about 40 spots. And I applied and I didn't make it in the first cut. I was number 13 on the wait list for 8 spots. And never in the history had the wait list cleared beyond 2 or 3. But it just so happened in that year, several of those who got in decided to go to the US or UK or went elsewhere, and the wait list cleared up to number 13. And so on a cold North Indian morning with 2 bags, I arrived in Chandigarh. I had no idea about speaking in Hindi, let alone Punjabi. But there was a classmate of mine who had got into surgery, and he said, Brian, it's very easy here. You just need to know 3 words. Idhar, Udhar, and Chadar.
Idhar, Udhar, and Chadar.
Yes. And I said, okay, what do they mean? Idhar is here, Udhar is there, and Chadar is the mattress, which needs to be changed every time a patient was moved. So that was my introduction to PGI and North India. And like in most Indian institutions, there was a strike. And there I came across an extremely charming, intelligent person who I later found out was number 2 in the entrance exam rankings and had got into pediatrics first shot. I tried really hard to attract her attention. She couldn't give me the time of the day. Long story short, that after many a try, she agreed to have a dinner with me. And in India, dating at that time was unheard of.
Unthinkable, yes.
Yeah, unheard of. Plus, I'm a South Indian Catholic. She was a North Indian Punjabi. And she was Hindu, I was Catholic. And, you can say none of the boxes checked.
Yeah. Okay.
But we continued our relationship, and fortunately, we brought our parents over the line, and life turned out in its own unusual ways. We had 3 weddings.
Mm-hmm.
The first wedding was a court wedding, which was because the married doctors' accommodations were allocated once a year, and we were getting married in August, and allocations were done in June. So we went to the high court, to the court. There were some guys there with stamp paper. Nothing was official. We said, just type this out that I read, and we got 2 folks who came along as witnesses. We submitted that. We got our married doctors' accommodations. And then we had a Hindu wedding in my wife's hometown of Jabalpur. Mm-hmm. And then we had a Catholic wedding in my hometown of Mangalore. So if ever a marriage has been solidified 3 times over, this was it.
Excellent, yes. So now let's stay in Chandigarh. And when we were doing a profile, for the newspaper, we came across that how a professor from US visiting saw you at the Chandigarh, and instantly he decided to bring you here in the US because he was able to see that potential. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, so this again goes along the theme of serendipity. Mm-hmm. I finished my MD in medicine, and I did my DM in nephrology. I could write well because my parents were both English teachers. And so I'd help my professor with the document for what was called the Nephrology Forum. And 3 of the leading luminaries in the field of nephrology came to Chandigarh to run the Nephrology Forum. Dr. Nick Medias, who was then the chief of nephrology, Jody Cohen, who was then the president of American Association of Medical Schools, and Jody Cohen, who was then going to be the dean at Tufts. And they came a day earlier, and since I spoke the best English, and I knew the best pubs in town, I was their chaperone. Yeah. And by the end of the evening, they said that, hey, listen, we have an opening for a fellowship in nephrology in Boston. Would you like to join us? I mean, for a kid in Chandigarh, being told that, we'd like to give you an opportunity to come to Boston was like dying and going to heaven. And so essentially, they convinced Sunita that coming to the US was a great place to raise a family because, in those days you read about in the Times and Newsweek about violence, drugs, and all of that in the US. And Sunita was initially not quite sure.
And what year was roughly around that?
1988.
88, okay.
And so, long story short, we packed our bags and our 2 kids and our nanny and moved to Boston.
Excellent. That's a fantastic journey, right? So
it was really, and never in our lives did we imagine what ultimately transpired in our careers and in our personal life would have ever happened.
Yeah. So now, before we come to move to US, I have one more question.
Sure.
Since you mentioned that your both parents were English teacher, how was growing up as a child, young child, and how important was the spelling at home?
Well, my parents were English teachers in Bahrain. And so our early lives were spent in Bahrain, in the Middle East. They were both English teachers, and the quality of schools was not great. So till you were 5 or 6 years of age, we lived with our parents. And then we, for schooling beyond that, we were shipped back to Mangalore. And we lived with my grandparents. It was an unusual life because my grandparents, like the typical Catholic families, had 13 children. My mother was the eldest. And we were added to that list. So there were 15 in my grandfather's house. Yeah. So it was one of those types of families wherein you make movies out.
Sure.
But the long and short of it was that my mother decided that she'll come back to India and set up home and make sure that, we grew up the right way. And by and large, my mother was the most influential person in our early lives. She was demanding, and she insisted that we put out our best, but she was always supportive. And I must say that my two younger brothers and I truly have to recognize that our department.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
That how your parents, what role, how they shaped your values and future?
Well, it was largely my mother, because my father would be in Bahrain and he would come down to Mangalore once a year for 2 months of vacation, and that was it. So my mother instilled in us the ethos, the work ethic, and our drive to aspire to do our best.
So what was her method of teaching? How she put these values or taught you?
It's interesting that there was no structure to it. What there was consistency. The consistency was, you've got to be excellent, you're competing against yourself, and you've got to do the absolute best that you can.
I think that's so simple and so powerful as well at the same time.
It is.
Yeah, excellent. So now, again, before we come to the US, so what you learned from your parents, how you have been able to share that with your own children?
Well, with our kids, at least I and Sunita to a large extent as well, have inculcated the same ethos that, you've got to work hard, you're competing against yourself, and we have to be consistent because kids are smart. If there is a shadow of doubt with respect to consistency, they're going to take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as each generation goes by, they're getting even better at that.
Excellent. So now let's move to 1988 and move to US. So you come to Tufts and Sunita comes here. And then the path just really accelerates, and any direction you go, as your mother had taught you, really you excel. And so how that happens and how talk about this phase of your life.
Yeah, I mean, as I said twice earlier, that serendipity is everything. I landed up in Boston in the end of June in 1990. And I was going to start a research fellowship with Andy Levy, who is one of my two key mentors in the US, the other being Dr. Nick Medias. And of course, the third one is my Indian mentor, the late Dr. Kirpal Singh Chuk. Hepatitis C had just been discovered, and the New England Organ Bank had a lot of serum of donors and recipients. And Andy said that, we have access to these samples. Let's test them and see what the prevalence of hepatitis C is among donors and among recipients, and to see whether, historically, there was transmission. And what's interesting is that I arrived at Tufts on the 26th of June. My fellowship was supposed to start on the 1st of July. And so, like most immigrants, I landed up on the 26th and tried to settle in. And Andy said, here's a willing and enthusiastic guy. Here's the project you're going to do. And essentially, we went to the Brigham. We got thousands of samples run, and we found that hepatitis C was highly prevalent among organ donors. And on the 30th, we submitted an abstract to the American Society of Nephrology for their annual meeting. This was one day before I was supposed to start. And then, we had a couple of papers in the New England Journal. This led to a change in dialysis and transplant policy. And, at the same time, I volunteered to work in the lab of Charles Tinarello, who was the guy who cloned interleukin-1. We looked at cytokines in dialysis patients. And that too turned out to be extraordinarily successful. And finally, I began to be interested in care of patients before they got to dialysis. And that too became timely because while everyone was focused on dialysis care, little did folks know at that time that it was the care prior to dialysis that really mattered. And I was fortunate to build a sizable lab with multiple NIH grants. And of course, Tufts sponsored me for a green card. And in no time, I became a full professor, and life was great.
Yeah. So now, before we come to this dialysis and kidney, because many of us here know that you work with here in the US and with AIF and other groups, but your work in India is absolutely, we are not very much familiar with that. So we'd like to talk about that. But before that, since you mentioned several times serendipity, many of our viewers who may not know what exactly it is, if you can just explain that concept of serendipity and what it is.
Well, serendipity is luck.
Mm-hmm.
Most schools and business schools tell you need a career plan.
Mm-hmm.
And to be very honest, most of what happens in folks' careers is serendipity. It's happenstance. It's chance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, it's important to have a prepared mind to take advantage of those opportunities. But I think if there's one theme that I have noticed, not just in my career, but in most careers of people who've gone on to be successful, is that serendipity plays a very important role. The second piece, just adjacent to that, is saying yes. Oftentimes, opportunities come by, you pass by, because you either think that, it's a bridge too far, it's too challenging, or maybe this is really not something I want to do. So volunteering and saying yes is often a great starting point.
And you were open always to all these.
Yes.
Like, when you coming here is a good example that how you, from Chandigarh, you moved here, professor said that you come here. So
yes.
So now let's talk a little bit about your projects in India. And especially I'm more interested in the kidney and dialysis part.
Yeah, so when I'll turn the page back by several decades, my maternal grandmother, with whom we grew up, had diabetes. She had kidney failure, and she died at the age of 57. And in those days, in my hometown of Mangalore, there was no dialysis. In fact, if you needed dialysis, you would have to go to Mumbai. So kidney failure was always on my mind. And so I chose to be a nephrologist when the time came. And when we moved here, it was very clear to us that while in the US, we had wonderful access to dialysis, in India at that time, I'm talking about the early 1990s, there was not much of dialysis available. And so by that time, I had built a lot of connections in the dialysis business, and I was on the board of a couple of dialysis companies. And so we said to our kids that let's start a foundation. And we named it Youth That Care, wherein we would take used dialysis machines in the US, refurbish them, ship them to India. And our kids stepped up. It was a great learning experience for them. It was a great experience for us too. And we started the first few dialysis centers. There were already dialysis centers in India, but a few additional dialysis centers with these refurbished dialysis machines. And that was a wonderful time. The Indian economy was opening up. And this became a stimulus for other hospitals to start dialysis. So we initially set up 6 dialysis centers in India and truly made an impact on the lives of patients. And I must say that in addition to impacting patients, it was truly a great learning experience for our kids. And that has helped them think about philanthropy in different ways as they grew up and had careers of their own.
Excellent. Now, also want to talk to you because also if you look at the corporate world, you also have a very successful and very exciting journey. So how did you get into the corporate world and the pharmaceutical world?
Again,
Serendipity.
Serendipity again. I was at Tufts. I was the CEO of the Physician Corporation at Tufts. And I was intellectually very, very satisfied because I continued my research. I managed an exciting physician corporation. And I was on the board of a biotech company called Advanced Magnetics. And, the Advanced Magnetics had been public for 25 years and had one asset which it was developing in the diagnostic radiology space. And it became clear that this asset could be used. It was an intravenous iron acid as a therapeutic in patients with kidney disease. So to make a long story short, a couple of the lead investors came to me and said, it'd be nice for you to come in and run the company. And for an academic executive, running a publicly traded company seemed very exciting. So I said yes. It was a wonderful experience. We built a team to take the drug through development. The drug got approved. We launched the drug, built a full commercial enterprise. Of course, the stock went through the roof, which is what some people care about. But the truth of the matter is that we brought innovative therapy to patients. Unfortunately, the side effect profile of the drug was not perfect. And after doing that for 7 years, I decided I was going to take a break. Being a public company CEO is a full-time, challenging job. And so I did a little bit of private equity, a little bit of venture capital investing, helped a startup company in the dialysis space in India called NephroPlus. They have 2 dialysis centers and great founders, young, dynamic people. Fast forward, it's the largest dialysis chain in India with about 500 centers today. But after doing that for a while, I got approached by Visterra.
Where you are currently
where
CEO.
I'm currently CEO. And the chief scientific officer at Visterra was a young, dynamic person who I had a lot of respect for. His name is Zach Schreiber. And they told me more about their technology. They were in the infectious disease space. And I said that, hey, if someday there is a major pandemic, influenza pandemic, we want to be at the leading edge and solving that issue. So from the first day that the recruiter approached me to the first day on the job, it was 2 weeks, which tells you how impressed I was with the technology and the people. And
how they are impressed by you too.
Well, I hope so. But the investors were great. Flagship, Polaris, Merck, Temasek, Gates Foundation. But many years later, we have advanced our infectious disease product. We're developing a product for dengue fever, which is a major problem in India. But raising money for an infectious disease company in those days was tough. Everyone was making a beeline towards oncology, some in immunology, and so on. But infectious disease was a no-no. How things have changed. Today, or the last 5 years, anyone saying infectious disease, there'll be a whole lot of funding available. So we decided that we were going to pivot towards nephrology. One is that, I'm a nephrologist by training, and I knew the opportunities and the challenges. And so we made a pivot, and we built a great pipeline. And shortly thereafter, Otsuka Pharmaceuticals made an offer that was attractive. Our investors were pleased with the offer. So 4 years ago, we were acquired by Otsuka. Now, I decided to stay on. Most times when you get acquired, the entire senior management team departs. I'm pleased to say that now 4+ years later, our entire management team is in place. Our entire research team is in place. We have increased our budget threefold, the number of people threefold, and we have a pipeline that's going to bring really breakthrough, best-in-class or first-in-class products for patients who have no solutions today.
So now coming back to serendipity again.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about 4 years ago this transaction happened. So this was for the first time in the history of Indian news for more than 20 years. In that daily edition, we had father leading the story and son followed him. So for the first time we had in one day, one story was about the father and one about the son. And it has never happened ever since. And even before it never happened. So great congratulations on that one.
That's serendipity too.
That's serendipity too, yes. So now I have a couple of more questions for you.
Sure.
One is I definitely want to bring AIF because you have played a very important role in that organization and fundraising. And I think you with Raj and Venkat and all have played a very, very important role in the whole movement. How did you get involved with AIF and what do you think that the impact AIF is creating?
Yes. So, as the CEO of a public company, you're compensated with cash and stock.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point you sell your stock and you make a few dollars. And so I heard about Raj as being one of the absolute best wealth managers.
Sure.
And so
in top 10 in the United States.
Now it is consistently number one.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I asked, and he approached us, and we became clients of his. And one of the first things he did was introduce us to the American India Foundation.
Mm.
And I must say that Raj and Nalini, his wife, and then Venkat and his wife Pratima, really opened the doors to us with respect to what philanthropy is. And we were so impressed with the American India Foundation that Sunit and I decided that would be our primary focus in terms of philanthropy. Now, having said that, there were other organizations that we also supported, Akshay Patra being one of them.
Sure.
And then Sunita was invited to be on the board of the Peabody Essex Museum. She loves art. And so these three organizations have been the three key areas that we focus our philanthropic dollars. And what we did was, when Visterra got sold to Otsuka, we put some of our money into and created a foundation.
Mm.
It became easier to create a foundation and run our philanthropic interest through that because we could now get our kids involved and our friends involved as well.
Excellent. So now, staying back on this philanthropy thing, sometimes when you start talking with people, philanthropy sounds very intimidating in many sense because you can do philanthropy only when you have a lot of money, when you are rich and extra cash and all this stuff. And many people shy away from that. I don't have money, I cannot do that. So how you are going to, if I ask you to give us some tips to people who are hesitant about philanthropy, thinking that I don't have that money, how they can get involved into this, how they can get involved with their mission and passion, if you can provide some tips on that.
Yeah, so I'd start off saying is we don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We are comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of philanthropy is it's wealth, wisdom, and work.
Wealth,
right?
Wisdom, and work.
Right.
Okay.
So wealth is money you bring to the table. Wisdom is your thoughtfulness, your experiences, which help guide the organization. And work is volunteering different parts of the organization. So one doesn't have to have all three to make an impact. And I think folks do get intimidated, but One thing that I was always impressed in this country is that Americans in general are extraordinarily generous.
Yes, true.
And when you raise money, it is the lowest paid employees who raise their hands first.
Mhm.
So whether it's Girl Scout cookies or someone who has had an illness and needs financial support, it's the lowest paid employees who are always first to raise their hand and the most generous. So that's something that has struck me as truly American, and something that all of us can. You don't have to be a millionaire or a billionaire to be philanthropic.
Anybody can.
Anybody can. In fact, when you read the Rockefeller story, or many of these stories, you'll hear that people started being generous way early before they became rich.
Sure. Yeah, and that's true. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Sure.
once they got rich, the scale increased, but they started it early.
So I think our conversation was very insightful. For me, it was a great learning experience listening to you, and your story is really fantastic. Now, I want to end this interview with some fun note. So I have a couple of questions for you, and let's see what you said. So my first question to you is, I'm sort of being, born and growing up in India. Of course, Bollywood is there, So do you have any favorite movies in Bollywood?
I must say that
Are-
I didn't go for too many movies,
Okay.
but one Bollywood movie which I've watched again and again is Slumdog Millionaire.
Okay, excellent. Uh-huh.
I've enjoyed the theme of the movie. I've enjoyed the acting and the Jai Ho song, which was recently showcased here in Boston, have always been close to my heart.
Hollywood?
Hollywood, Godfather 1, 2, and 3. I have watched them probably about 50 times each.
50 times each.
Yes, because I think that Godfather is probably one of the most important family and business movies made. It tells you the imperatives in business life, and it tells you the imperatives of being a tight-knit family.
Now, what about your favorite actress?
My favorite actress, I was always fond of Meg Ryan. That movie Sleepless in Seattle. Oh my God, she was truly amazing in that movie. Beyond that, I don't watch too much of movies. I'm a Verizon's favorite customer. I pay my monthly bill, but I don't watch TV.
Okay. Any your early crushes on Bollywood actresses, or you said you didn't really watch much there?
Not much.
Not much. Yeah. Now, what about songs? Any particular song which rings in your head when you are in great romantic mood?
Well, the Eagles are my favorite band, and Hotel California to me has been one of the best ever. Growing up, the musicians who we listened to in India were a mixture of also popular in the US or not. But as I said, Eagles were by far my favorite group.
What about if you look in terms of, we all get inspired by somebody, our own parents or grandparents or some political leaders or social leaders. Who has been your most inspiring role model for you?
To me, my most inspiring role models have been my teachers and my mentors. Dr. Kirpal Singh Chugh, who was the founder of nephrology in India, and here in this country, Andy Levy and Nick Medias at Tufts. They selflessly gave of me their time. They promoted me beyond what I deserved, and they were always available to me for help and advice. I'm not sure I've had too many business role models. It's just because I didn't come up the business route, I came up the academic route.
Mm.
But I've had good friends who have been peers, like John Maragnore, the CEO of Alnylam, and a few others who have been close friends and confidant over the years.
Excellent. Now, what about books? Like some of the books which have registered or have say, "Oh, this is a very interesting book I read." And
in recent times, I read Anarchy, and Anarchy really recast for me the entire British, role in India, and how the British East India Company really was a publicly traded company which became an acquirer of countries. The history that we learned in school was dramatically different from how it's presented in Anarchy. It's about a 500, 600 page book, but I must say, very well worth it. I like the Malcolm Gladwell books, Blink in particular.
Yeah, I have read that.
Yes,
yeah.
Which tells you that most times the decision you make is right off the bat, and then the rest, is just confirmatory. I've liked the biography of John D. Rockefeller. It's the Titan. It truly is inspirational as to how he built an empire. I'm always looking for another good book to read.
Yeah, well, if you are looking for a good book, I highly recommend Thinking 101. It has been just recently published by a psychologist, a professor at Yale. And she has been just totally teaching you how to rethink about everything. Fantastic book. I have just read, I'm halfway through, but already it has changed my thinking about so many things. So Thinking 101.